Hello, and thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and iTWire TV interview. I'm joined today by Heiko Gerin. He is the Head of Engineering Australia at Thoughtworks. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. I'm more than happy to talk to you today.
It's great to have you on. Now, I noticed that Thoughtworks was founded back in 1993. So, what did it start doing back then? And what does Thoughtworks offer to the world in 2021?
So, the very early stages of ThoughtWorks, it was building software for leasing equipment. It was called it was called Stingham Business Services back then. But they pivoted, I think, 2 years after that and rebranded to be called ThoughtWorks because I think the idea was like similar to Steelworks. It is like the where you go to like think up solutions. And
Yeah.
while starting in Chicago, it's been growing globally now, and until we've been hitting about 9,000 employees this year,
Mhm.
and we're in a lot of different countries. In Australia, we've got three, like Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne.
And did you, at the beginning you said it worked on LASIK equipment? I'd missed that bit.
That was equipment leasing
Oh,
equipment.
leasing. Sorry,
Yeah,
yeah. The vagaries
big,
of Zoom.
big machinery. And I think it came because our initial founder had an accounting background, so
Hmm.
that's where that came from. But it pivoted into transformation, software delivery in general for large enterprise clients. And they were quite quick to jump on the initial agile software delivery movement. So back in 2001, I think it was, the Agile Manifesto was first signed, and we were quite early adopters of agile software delivery. And agile software delivery, not just like locally with companies, but also distributed agile. So the company has grown quite significantly, and we've done a lot of distributed agile software delivery out of India and China and a couple of other delivery centers. And that's what we focus on a lot these days as well, as digital transformation. So
Yeah.
getting our clients from analog businesses, and we talk about unlocking their potential and unlocking the business assets and bringing them into the digital age. So a lot of our clients are traditional companies like banks, insurance companies, utilities, that kind of thing. But we increasingly also work with software product companies and SaaS companies because a lot of them have been around for a long time now, and they've built their own legacy. And especially migrating into cloud has been a big focus for our traditional and our more product company clients, and more software companies as well.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, you would have seen a lot of different stages of evolution during the digital transformation process. I mean, in the year 2000, that was the first time I heard of SaaS, or software as a service. And of course, now in 2021, it's so much vastly more mature and sophisticated. And people might have been, undergoing some of these transformations a decade ago, and it's all changed, for the better in 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite interesting to see because seeing the evolution myself as well, from receiving CD-ROMs in the mail or
Mhm.
the diskettes even in the early days, to it now being all cloud-based and SaaS and everything as a service. It's quite staggering. But there's a lot that's going on behind the scenes to make that happen.
Yeah.
And we see that a lot with companies that hit early success, and suddenly their processes, their technology, and their team structures even just don't keep up with the growth, because once you hit that exponential growth, things need to change quite significantly. And even transformations that are sometimes like 2 to 3 year affairs, like, need to happen really rapidly,
Mm.
especially in a market that is so competitive and things need to move so quickly.
Yeah, everything is, and everyone is scaling together. All parts of the business need to keep up. Now, you mentioned banks and you mentioned some of the different industries, but can you please tell us about some of the global and Australian companies that ThoughtWorks counts as customers, and the types of transformative solutions that you've helped these companies to implement?
Yeah, so similar to what I've said before, like lots of what we'd call more traditional enterprises that want to move into the digital age are
Hmm.
more our global customers. So there's companies like BP, there's big retailers, for example, like Metro or Otto, and there's also some things like American fast food restaurants, things that you probably wouldn't expect, at least not from the get-go. In Australia, our focus is on that as well, but
Hmm.
we've been like having a lot of attention in Australia more on what we talked about just then, which was SaaS companies, product companies. So places like Xero, for example, in New Zealand, but also Atlassian, which is like the Australian poster child for a Silicon Valley style software company, for example. They're all among our clients here. And the solutions we offer are really varied. So recently we've been doing a lot of data work, so data engineering, data science, especially with clients that have this vast estate of data that they just need. It's all sitting there. They just need to unlock it to like gain some value and gain some insights. And they've got a huge advantage on their competitors because they've got all this stuff just sitting there. It just needs to be unlocked. They're just being held back by more traditional technology and operating models. That's really interesting. That also feeds into like this talk about digital platforms. We talk about that a fair bit, giving companies and organizations the ability to like deliver solutions fast and iterate on their estate, on what they have. Like internal platforms is what we're talking about there. So this also feeds into developer experience and not just first-party developer experience. And that's the people inside the company that need to ship solutions, but also third parties. So lots of companies now have discovered how useful APIs are, for example, and building ecosystems. So first and third party developer experience is something we're focusing on a lot as well. We've got a little bit of a advisory arm as well. So transforming technology is one thing, but most of the times like technology is not really the key to transforming. It's just like they're the people that are executing and they need to be there and they need to be using modern practices. But it really is about like building the right thing, not just building the thing right. So a lot of times we also help our clients with prioritization, with portfolio management, with like being able to say no to things, for example, doing the right thing and just doing something in the small, validating it, experimenting, and then maybe, giving up on the thing that wasn't as successful. So that's what we do a lot as well. We have a bit of a design aspect to us as well. So there's a decent amount of not just product designer, but also like visual design going on. So we believe in interdisciplinary software delivery teams. So we bring together all sorts of disciplines that includes design and product people, developers, obviously. So we tend to do that a lot. But yeah, so like pretty broad strokes. This is kind of what we do. If you were to ask me what I do day to day, is I look after teams that deliver digital products and services and make sure that they're successful.
Sure. Now, you've got XConf, which is the Thoughtworks annual technology event, and we're told that this will be the 4th year in Australia that it's brought to us online. And the theme of this year is the expanding impact of hostile tech. And so why is this so topical and important in 2021?
Also, XConf itself is like, we've been running this conference, not online, but as a face-to-face conference for a couple of years now. And mostly because we really felt like we wanted to have a technology-heavy conference or like a peer-to-peer conference with people talking about what they're doing and learning from their peers and what's going on a day-to-day basis. So 2020, obviously, due to COVID, we had to change that. We're not just doing it in Australia, we're doing it in a number of different regions, like in the EU, in Southeast Asia, in North America, in India and Brazil. But Australia is the region that had started it, so we're quite proud of that. And the reason we're doing it is because we like to share. I think we talked about that, peer-to-peer mostly, and we want to not have a fluffy conference that talks about what we could be doing in theory or how we sell things. That's interesting as well, but it's not the focus of this. So it's really about high quality tech topics and exchanging ideas. Now the theme this year is the expanding impact of hostile technology. It's a pretty topical thing because with everyone, well, not with everyone, but with a lot of knowledge workers and workers in general moving to like remote first work as the default, things have changed. Like the attack surface of organizations has massively expanded. You can't necessarily hide behind a firewall anymore, especially if your workers are distributed all over the country or all over the planet, really. So it really is quite interesting to talk about how that environment is impacting our day-to-day lives and especially the risks that poses as well, because a lot of what technology is and does is by default not 100% safe. So we need to be clear about what we trust, who we trust, what we can trust. And a big part of the conference this year is talking about that. So the keynote is going to be by a gentleman called Scott Davis. I've worked with him actually in a working group around the future of digital identity and decentralized trust. And it is also what he's going to be talking about. So it's this idea of citizens themselves taking back custodianship of their personal information and actually granting the trust to organizations rather than organizations being these massive vaults of personal identifying information that they actually shouldn't have any business in maintaining, because their core business is not in maintaining digital identity. It's in, I don't know, banking, or it's in telecommunications. So I'm really excited about that topic specifically. There's also a lot of other things that we're going to be talking about that are less futuristic, that they are more applicable for practitioners in their day-to-day lives. So I'm going to be talking about securing the software supply chain, for example. And it's mostly about things that people can do on the grounds in their day-to-day jobs to keep everyone more safe, which is, I think, something that's really important, because you can't really trust in a decentralized world into like a centralized security department that keeps everyone safe anymore. That is important as well, but I think it's in everyone's own responsibility to look after this stuff themselves. There's also a section that I always love, and that's tales from things that have gone wrong. So like privacy horror, things that we've seen go south, either in the things that we've done ourselves or at clients, or just things that we have learned from, because there's nothing that you learn more from than failure. So we do tend to embrace failure and try to learn from it as much as we can. So that's what XConf this year is all about.
And clearly you'll be sharing the Thoughtworks approach to security and privacy. I mean, those are fundamental things that people have, developers, companies have had to think about from the word go, which we never used to think about in the early days. But now, if you don't think about those sorts of things, you're guaranteeing you're going to be hacked or under attack.
Yeah, it's interesting because we do things on a couple of different altitudes. So we are doing a lot of security things in our day-to-day work when we're doing product delivery. So we have integrated a whole bunch of security rituals into our day-to-day work, things that normally like an entire department is responsible for, like the security department or the penetration testing department. These are all good things, but it really is quite a lot more meaningful to have people that are actually writing software and delivering products thinking about these things themselves as well. So we sometimes refer to that as shifting security left, as like being more close to people on the tools. So things like threat modeling sessions and things like, we sometimes call it building security in, and just building a security mindset in not just our people and our consultants, but also in our clients, because we're getting quite good feedback on those things, and people that we work with tend to adopt them themselves, and then we share these things and these practices. So that's sort of on the actual, on the grounds, maybe micro level, but we also have a bit of a macro view of security and privacy in general. So Thoughtworks is fairly vocal about our belief in privacy, in like the right to be forgotten. We work with Digital Rights Watch a fair bit, and we a lot of Thoughtworkers share their values, and we've got this, I would call it like a healthy distrust of like handing over personal identifying information to government agencies, but also big tech conglomerates and corporations. So there's a bit of a long history of us doing that. We had a lot of opinions, for example, on the COVID Safe app and how that was handled in terms of privacy. That was published a little while ago. So we were not fans, not necessarily because of the idea, but more of the way it was implemented, for example. So we advocate for these things a fair bit. In terms of privacy and freedom of information, Aaron Swartz, a famous activist, used to be a Thoughtworker at the time that he was prosecuted. So not many people know that, for example, as well. So we have a history of being involved in these things and standing up for what we believe to be right.
Now, I noticed that the day one workshop is already at capacity and there's now a waiting list. But what are some of the talks scheduled for day two and how do people register for the event?
Yeah, so we actually have, because it was booked out quite quickly, we actually have added a second workshop on day two. So we'll be running that concurrently so people can register for that again as well.
Okay, that's good.
Speakers on the first day, Lizzie O'Shea is the founder and chair of Digital Rights Watch, and Scott Davis, who I've talked about before, he's a principal engineer with Thoughtworks based out of the States in Denver. And we've also got 10 topics and 10 speakers of thought workers from Australia that have been working on the ground with teams, and like we'll be talking about things that people can do in their day-to-day lives. So in terms of signing up, it's on Monday, the 13th of September to Tuesday, the 14th of September. Signing up is quite easy. Just go to www.thoughtworks.com /xconf-au and can just register and join us online and join us digitally if you'd like.
Yeah, I'll make sure the link is appearing on this right now on the screen, and it'll also be in the description of this video, and it will be in the article this video is embedded into. Now, as we get towards the end of the interview, I'd just like to change gears a bit and talk a little bit about yourself and ask if you could please share your memory of your first computer.
Yeah, so my very first computer was an Apple LC2. I think it had 8 megabytes of RAM, which was fairly large at the time. I grew up in a small town in Austria, so I think we were the only family that was the Mac family. Back then there was Mac and PC families. So I didn't actually know anyone else that was using that thing.
Yeah.
But I do remember quite vividly playing Shufflepuck, like a black and white like air disc game, which I really enjoyed.
Air hockey or something, yeah.
Air hockey. And I think we got a performer after that with Photoshop on it. And it took me a lot longer to get into programming than it did in me getting to play with visual design. So there was a couple of really embarrassing things I posted on dial-up internet forums that were just abstract Photoshop designs that I
did. And what's a little bit about your own history in the world of tech?
I was always interested. So from playing around in Photoshops and making little drawings to teaching myself JavaScript and HTML when I was 14 and 15. But I never really saw myself going into tech. So actually, when I finished school, applied for university to study international business processes because I really felt like I needed to do that at the time. But I failed the entry exam, and my mother, bless her, told me that, how about you just apply to do something with computers? You like computers, don't you? And I was like, yeah, actually I do. So that's how I ended up in technology in the first place.
And you mentioned a little bit before, but what's a sort of day-to-day in the life of the head of engineering?
Well, a lot of it is actually talking to people, surprisingly. So I would say that my main job is making sure that people communicate and connecting people and getting them together, because we do have a lot of consultants working on a lot of different clients on different things, but they're also on related things. So just knowing where we're doing similar things and getting people to communicate and chat to each other is a huge part of what my role is. I also do a little bit of assurance. So if clients are not 100% happy with what we've built, for example, I tend to be the person that comes in and tries to get and fix it. I also do a fair bit of client work still. So I do advisory, try to help with transformation of our clients, and get sometimes brought in to help out and do presentations, for example. So it's a huge variety. I also try to get hands-on and write some code every now and again. Try to do that at least every 2 weeks. At least that's booked out in my calendar. So I make sure I'm still on the tools and I'm not getting rusty. So I feel like that's important, but
absolutely,
it's more because I don't want to lose track of how things work. And sometimes I feel like the consultants that write code would just laugh at me as just, a seagull manager if I don't know how to do that anymore.
Yeah, no, it's important to stay sharp and learn about the new tips and tricks and, all the new techniques. So, from the past to the future, how do you think ThoughtWorks will evolve over the next couple of years? And how do you see the industry in, say, 2030?
Mm. We have an entire arm and department at Thoughtworks that looks at that actually. So we have a publication that we call Looking Glass that is aimed at execs, and it talks about what are the trends, what do we need to look at, and what do people need to focus on immediately in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years. And it's quite exhaustive and it's quite interesting. There's two things that I'm particularly interested in at the moment, and one of them is sustainability. So I believe that there's going to be a huge push in looking at carbon footprint and emissions and CO2 footprint of cloud computing or computing resources in general. Like as we move a lot of our compute and a lot of our applications into the cloud, a lot of the electricity we use with those cloud vendors is actually quite dirty, especially depends on the region that these things are in. So I'm really keen on looking at that and helping companies like become carbon neutral or like achieve their target, or at least visualizing the impact that what they do have is on the environment. So there's quite a great Thoughtworks project there that we just open sourced out of the US, and it's called Thoughtworks Green Cloud. We've just done some work with some of our biggest clients in Australia to help them visualize what the impact is that teams have on like the emissions that they produce, which is a quite interesting thing to see. And I'd be quite keen to see what that does and how that changes their behavior. Because if you in real time are shown what the impact is of what you do on the climate and on society in general, I wonder what that will do to how people write code in their day-to-day lives. Yeah. That's a quite interesting thing. The second thing is, again, topical hostile tech. I think that is probably the biggest thing that we'll be looking into in the next couple of years. Just as we probably won't be going 100% back to in-office work, I think it's really going to become more and more important. And it is front of mind. There's things like entire oil and gas pipelines are getting ransomware at the moment. It's quite staggering. So a lot of executives and a lot of companies are thinking about that and are thinking about what is their exposure, what are they vulnerable to, how could they prevent that happening to them. So I think a lot of what we'll see in the next little while is going to be related to that.
So my second last question is to ask if you could please share the best piece of advice that you've received to help you get where you are today.
There's one thing that a very tenured person working at Thoughtworks told me when I first joined, and he said, just say yes to everything, no matter what they ask of you and what they ask you to do. Now, it's valuable, but I would sort of add a qualifier to it. It's like, say yes most of the time, because there's always the risk that you get pigeonholed into something that may not be necessarily the best thing to do for your career. But just in general, like career advice in general, I'm pretty sure nothing I have done leading up to this role here has been that intentional in terms of my career. A lot of the things I have done are things that I've fallen into, or are things that have sounded vaguely interesting and I've just said yes to. Like I've started my career as a software tester a very long time ago. I've said yes to going into infrastructure. I've said yes to going into delivery management. I've said yes in the end to becoming a consultant. So it is just what happened, and it turned out to be the right thing.
So what's your final message to iTWire viewers and readers, and to your current and future customers and partners?
Well, I think it would be good to look at especially the hostile tech impact of what you're doing. So it's just to plug the conference again, of course. But it would be great to have you come and join us and just learn about the future of digital identity and digital trust. I genuinely believe it's a big part of where we're going as a society, not just as a technology industry. If you are a strategist, that would be the thing for you. If you're a practitioner that's looking to implement some things in your day-to-day work, if you're a delivery lead, if you're a developer that wants to make everyone a little bit more safe and secure, there's something for you there as well. So I'd very much like you to join us there if you can.
Well, Heiko Gerin, the head of engineering for Australia at Thoughtworks, thank you very much for your time. Best of luck with the conference, and I hope we can talk again in the future.
Me too. Thanks a lot for that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.